2, 1.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hey, everybody.
Excellent, Tracy. We're with The Road to Retail. On our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer tips, insights, ideas, and examples for how small emerging challenger CPG brands can build their business. We try to cover everything from determining if you're ready to grow, where to start, how to prove it online, how to go about securing distribution at a national retailer, driving your business through to the consumer, and how to go about finding an investor if that's important to you. The bottom line is we would love to help you be successful by highlighting the many important steps along this journey of growing your brand. Tracy and I have made a lot of mistakes over the years, and if we can save you some time and heartache, we'd love to do it. Tracy?
Yeah, Bruce and I have been in consumer packaged goods commercial operations for 30 years. And what we mean by commercial operations is sales, marketing, trade marketing, investments, divestitures, broker management, distributor management, all kinds of different pieces of the consumer packaged goods industry. And so on our episodes, we, as Bruce said, our intention is to really educate you, save you some time and pain in your journey in building your brand. So on today's episode, we've got a very special guest. So Bruce, would you like to go and introduce Richard to us?
Absolutely. Today's guest is Richard Palmer, and he's the executive creative director at a great design firm called Little Big Brands. I've had the pleasure of working with Richard and his firm on several projects, and they have always exceeded expectations, which is hard to do because I have high expectations. Richard, welcome. And we'd love to hear you tell a little bit more about yourself, your background, and your firm, please.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Tracy. I'm really happy to be here today. As you said, Richard Palmer, I'm the creative director at Little Big Brands. Little Big Brands is in Westchester in New York, in a town called White Plains. We're a branding agency that started in 2000, and we started as a packaging agency primarily, and we've cut our teeth and honed our skills doing that, but we're much more than that now. We really position ourselves as a strategic agency. We do strategy up front, we do branding, we do digital, and we also do production. So whatever you need, we can do it for you. And we're not just one of those agencies that says they can do everything. If there's something we can't do, we'll be very honest about it and upfront about it. And we have plenty of partners that we trust, that we've worked with in the past, that we would introduce you to as a client. As you've probably gathered by now, I'm not from these parts originally. I am from England. Went to school in England, got a degree in graphic design, and I graduated back in '96. So I've been doing it quite a while. I came over here in 2001, very intrigued by the American market from a branding perspective. Coming from Europe, had much more of a kind of less is more, clean aesthetic, and wondered if I'd ever be able to infiltrate the American market, which was chuck everything in the kitchen sink on the package, let it scream, 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 and really sort of see if there was an opportunity for me to bring some of that English aesthetic or European aesthetic to the American market. As I said, I started here in 2001, an agency called Landor Associates. I worked in their office in New York and Cincinnati. Then I came back and worked at Sterling Brands for a very long time. Really sort of honed my skills at Sterling. I was there for 7 years. Then went to Anthem, which was a part of Schork, and they have offices all around the globe. So that was really interesting, managing the network of creative talent there. A fantastic team there too. And then I landed at Little Big Brands in 2014, and been here ever since. Very happy. We have a great team of people. And it's a joy to do what we love to do every day. So that's a bit about me.
No, that's great. Thank you
Awesome.
so much. So before we jump in with Tracy leading off, the goal here today, folks, is to give you the perspective from a professional that does this, everything around kind of locking in your brand, everything from design to structure, as Richard said, and you know, how to go about it, the steps you really need to take, because kind of like, at least my mom used to always say, how come there's never time to do it right, but always time to do it twice? And in this day and age, you know, making big mistakes can be fatal to your brand. So you got to be really cautious. And we know stuff costs money, and Richard's going to talk about these things, but that's what we're trying to do here today. Tracy?
Absolutely. So let's just jump in. And again, thank you, Richard. And you just have an awesome background, and I think you're going to be very insightful to our audience today. So my first question is for our small emerging brand audience. What are the top 3 things that a small emerging brand needs to really consider when developing, you know, their packaging? What do they want? What's really the 3 biggest thing? Packaging is so important today because that is your, you know, and I think you'll agree here, the face of your brand to the consumer on the shelf. So what do they really need to think about? Tell us about the top 3 things that they need to consider when developing their packaging.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Tracy. I think, you know, so many of these emerging brands, they have the great idea, whether that's something they've been working on at the weekends or in the evenings to mine through prototyping, whatever it might be. And then they get the opportunity to go to market with it, and they just want to sell really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that the key thing with that is to really don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just go straight to market without really getting to know your category inside and out. Your competition is really important too, because you want to find out what they're doing right, but also what they're doing wrong. And then just really understanding your consumer. Who are you going after? What do they need? Why should they have your product? How do they use it, or how will they use it? And I think ultimately it's, like I said, it's about taking a step back. Don't be in so much of a rush to make the first $1 million, right? I think that the things that we do here is we really we guide our clients for success. So we always say, really sort of take a step back to find the white space in the category, you know, the blue ocean versus the red ocean of all the other products that are out there that are competing and just killing each other. Also, it's about finding your tone and voice. How do you want to speak to the consumer? How do you want to engage with the consumer? And I think that fundamentally is really, really important, because I know you guys are road to retail, but the retail part of a brand now is almost secondary or almost tertiary in terms of the first moment of truth with a consumer. More often than not, it's about the brand experience at large, how you're engaging with the consumer on social media, on point of sale, on a banner ad, on a pop-up website, on your Amazon page, right? Before they've even gone into your brick and mortar and actually seen your product for the first time. The other opportunity is about thinking about your product itself and that in-hand moment with the consumer. You know, a lot of times, because of the speed to market kind of overtakes all of the things I've just been talking about, the structural element of your product, whether it be an OTC product, whether it be food, whether it be beverage, often gets overlooked. And it's kind of like that, oh gosh, I just got to get something off the shelf, something stock off the shelf. The problem with that is that everybody else, or not everybody, but a lot of people do the same thing. So then you're just creating a Me Too situation from a silhouette, structure silhouette. You're not really giving yourself the best opportunity to engage with the consumer from that standpoint. There is a cost involved in that. Obviously, that if you have a proprietary cat fixture or bottle silhouette or closing mechanism, whatever it might be, that's going to engage the consumer in a different way, it's going to cost more money. But ultimately, it's a worthwhile investment because it creates a memory trigger with the consumer that's either benefited their experience or just something really interesting for them, that they kind of become an evangelist and tell friends and family or whomever it might be about that particular experience. So it's almost like free advertising, if you like.
Mhm.
So I think that those are real fundamental things to think through for a challenger brand. There's plenty more, but those are the things that just come top of mind right now.
Yeah, that's great. And folks, I can tell you from working with Richard's firm on a restage we did with a company I was working for, they came in and exactly like he said, they proposed that we design our own proprietary bottle. So being a cheap Scottish guy, I was like, what? That's gonna cost a lot more money and time.
Yeah.
And the woman leading this project for us, tremendously talented. She sold that all the way through, and it was a home run. And we started getting inquiries as to would we make their private label of certain big retailers, because one said, this is going to make my private label offering look terrible. And that was okay with me because that wasn't the business we were in. So that's a live example of I lived it based on their recommendation. So
Hey, Bruce, I wanted to say one thing. So
please.
what I really loved about what Richard said was how starting with the consumer, and a lot of brands that we talk to and deal with, you're right, Richard, it's all about sale, sale, sale. I just want sales.
Yeah.
You know, I have stars in my eyes, I have dollar signs in my eyes, and they don't put the consumer first. And I think what you really said hit home with me is it's an investment, but you've got to do it right first. Start with the consumer, you know what your voice is, what your position is, because if you don't do it right and you're in a hurry, which I see this all the time, I'm in a hurry, I want to get on the shelf, you know, I just want to sell my product.
Yeah.
Everybody, you know, my friends and family, you know, in the local farmers market loves my brand, it's my baby. But don't be in a hurry is really what I heard you say, and really start with the consumer.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, as entrepreneurs, you've invested everything. You probably remortgaged your house, right? Or whatever
Correct.
it would be. The last thing you want is to have fear of failure, because you actually in your gut don't think that you've done the due diligence that you needed to do. It's better to take a little extra time, push the launch out a couple of months so that you can do it right, because otherwise you're going to be off the shelf as fast as you are on the shelf.
So Richard, I think this dovetails into what you're saying, but I want to ask it anyway, so you can tell the folks listening. Is there such thing as a point of no return with an emerging brand where maybe they're selling locally, farmers market, maybe a bit of DTC, and again, we all have pride of ownership, especially if we're the one who gave birth to this brand. But is there a point of no return where you just really can't touch that logo or color scheme or look and feel, or is that, you know, a mirage? What do you think?
I think it really depends on the amount of time that we're talking about. So I think anywhere up to a year, you're probably safe to even just say, yeah, we can change whatever we want. We haven't, at this point, we haven't got a foothold in the category. We haven't grown a loyal following. We don't, you know, we haven't had much consumer feedback on social, whatever. But it really does depend on so much time, but also distribution. I mean, how far and wide has your product reached? You know, how many different demographics of consumers have you touched? I think ultimately what we would do to sort of uncover whether we have permission to change or not is consumer research, right? So you need to go out and mine the data to find out who is buying your product, how old they are, where they live, what's their household income, what's their demographic of their house, but also if there's any like repeat purchases. So not just necessarily the basket rings, but are the same consumers going back and buying the product again? This will give you so much information. And again, this goes back to the fear. It's eliminating risk, eliminating fear. Do the research, find out before you change. It shouldn't be reactive, because often when it's reactive, it's the wrong thing to do.
Oh, absolutely.
So we do a lot of that. We want to, you know, cross our T's and dot our I's for all of our clients. We're invested in their brand as much as they are. We find that when we have collaborative relationships, that they just foster a much better working environment. and also repeat business for us as well, selfishly. But it does, if you really do the due diligence, you're less likely to fail. So it's a hard question to ask, to answer, but I think that you really just have to determine whether it's the right or wrong thing to do. If a brand's been around for 10 years and there's heritage and sort of brand awareness, then it's a lot more difficult. I mean, there's been plenty of examples in the past where, you know, I won't name the brand, but you mentioned Pepsi earlier on. They did it with a brand, I think it was probably early 2000s, and they said, to hell with consumer research, we're just going to do it. And then within 3 months, they reverted back to the previous design because it absolutely tanked, because they didn't connect with their consumer. They didn't understand the consumer or the category.
So, Richard, knowing that the mindset of the entrepreneur is always go, 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 you know, damn the torpedoes. Yeah, the bridge is out, but it'll be rebuilt when I get there. Mm-hmm. What types of research, without getting into budgets, because it all depends on the project, et cetera, but what are the couple of things you think a consumer would do? So if I came to you with Tracy and my favorite example of a delicious gluten-free chocolate chip cookie, and maybe I'm doing $1.5 million in my home market, what are the couple of things, if I showed up in your guys' office and I had some money to spend, and so far I've talked myself into doing it the right way and trying to be patient, what are the couple of things you think the folks should consider?
Yeah, we do something called social listening, which is really informative. And what we do with that is we really mine through the social outlets. So it could be Instagram, it could be Facebook, it could be even reviews on Amazon, anywhere that we can get that information, find out what consumers are saying, you know, and then, so that's almost like step one. That's not actually getting in front of consumers and asking consumers, you know, provocative questions. But then we could either do qualitative research and really sit down and have conversations with consumers, expose them to some of the work or the brand, or even things that we are thinking of doing to see if there is permission for us to go there and make a big leap, or even evolve a certain claim, or, you know, introduce a different brand asset, something that we've uncovered could actually be a benefit to the brand. And then ultimately you would do quant to actually, you know, validate the move. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot. Those are the kind of three main things, but you can dive a lot deeper into that. It all depends, like you said, on budget.
Right. Tracy?
Yeah. So Richard, you've seen a lot of brands over your years, global brands, you know, big brands, small brands. What are the top 3 mistakes you see small emerging brands or any brand make in regards to their packaging?
Well, I think we've covered one of them, and that is kind of just not doing the due diligence up front. That's a massive one. I mean, just thinking about, you know, that Ferrari they want to buy with their profits. If you don't, you're never going to get the money to buy a Ferrari if you don't do it right. And I think there's some other tactical things that we often see. What we pride ourselves on here as well is talking to the back-end printers early. One of the things we find and we see happen a lot is that you'll come up with a fantastic design, and let's just say it has a lot of vibrant colors on it, but you haven't considered the board, the substrate it's going to print on, that might soak up the ink.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. You
haven't considered the budget that you've allotted to print the product. So we've set the design up, or let anybody set the design up using, you know, special colors, but you can only print CMYK. I would never recommend printing just CMYK anyway, because if you print CMYK and you have multiple different print vendors, one CMYK press is going to be different from another one. So then when your brand shows up on the shelf, your logo might look completely different color side by side.
So for us rookies, Richard, what's CMYK?
Mm-hmm.
Cyan, yellow, magenta, and black. So it's just 4 colors. So there's a spectrum of colors called Pantone, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Mhm.
And what happens with that is it's a specifically mixed ink that is the same anywhere it's printed. So if you use Pantone colors, you have much more consistency and control about how your brand is going to show up. The other thing is to consider varnishes and finishes. So these are all tricks that will help your brand stand out on the shelf that just should not be overlooked. So we really pride ourselves on thinking about that up front, so that when we get to the 11th hour and we print it, ultimately we're not disappointed. And then the last thing I think that's really important, and you mentioned this earlier on, is that you want to have protectable elements. So if you're going to the market and your category already has some pretty big players in it, and you're coming to the market and you're going to be a disruptor with something new that's going to add value to the consumer, it's a real reason to believe in buying your product versus the product that's been there for 10 plus years. You've got to think about trademarking those elements.
Mhm.
And that could be your name, that could be your logo, that could be your visual assets, that could be a patent on your product. It's really, really important you do that, because we live in a private label world where they'll come out, they'll rip your color palette off, your graphics. I mean, you've only got to look at the pharmaceutical retailers, your CVS, your Walgreens. Their private label brands mimic national brands.
Yeah.
So, and they do that on purpose so that the consumer actually picks that up next to it and says, oh, hang on a minute, I'll do a comparison. Well, this one's $5 less than national brand. I'm going to pick that. But if you've protected your graphic elements and your naming, you're less likely to have that happen. And I think that's really, really important. It's a capital investment, but it's well worthwhile.
Yeah.
So Richard, a follow-up question there. So you guys are a design firm. You've done all this wonderful work.
Mhm.
You've come up with a logo and a color scheme that's really unique for your client. You know, can you tell the group a bit about the need to actually focus some of the time on the structure? And by that, I mean, if some of these smaller brands are only selling locally or at a farmer's market, they might be literally hand delivering 6 pieces to a local store. You know, talk about how you evaluate and coach your clients on, hey, wait a minute, Bruce, you know, we're now going to put 24 of these in a case, and it's going to get dropped like 15 times between your co-packer and Wegmans.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point and
Good.
question. And I was talking about that earlier on in terms of, you know, creating a proprietary structure for your brand. There are a lot of logistical and tactical issues with doing that. You have to take into consideration the palatability of it through shipping. So, you know, you want to have something that's going to hold up and be rigid enough that if you have 20 of them stacked on top of each other, it's not going to collapse. Right, you've got to think about the substrate in terms of it might get water on it. It might be stuck outside and get rained on. Yes, it's probably going to have like a cellophane wrap on it, but they're not waterproof. So is there something you can do to it to protect it from that standpoint as well? But yeah, the ergonomics of how things fit together is really important.
So yeah, that's interesting, because another live example is we had a nice product and we had a great outer box, but we kept getting tons and tons of complaints that the corners of the boxes were crushing due to shipping. So we had to go to a 1 level up thicker cardboard to get rid of that. And it cost us, but we ended up saving money. The presentation was much better. And a lot of retailers, rightfully, were returning them, because who in their right mind buys the dented can or the crushed box of cereal? Nobody.
Absolutely.
Nobody.
Yeah.
They go to the back room and you get billed for it. Tracy?
So I just wanted to add one thing.
Oh, please.
I think,
Yes, please.
I think there's a step in here that is, you know, kind of going back to the question, what are a few mistakes that entrepreneurial or challenger brands make? One of them is make comps, so mock-ups of your product. If you're using a manufacturer to create a bottle or a box, have them send you a mock-up of what it is. Have them send you several so that you can do, you know, fake testing of how these will hold up if they're all stacked on each other. Obviously, they're not going to send you an entire pallet, but it will give you an idea, run it through the ringer a little bit so that you can feel more confident. These are all things that go towards me saying earlier on that you don't want to have fear in failure. You want to cross your T's and dot your I's. Take the time, do the due diligence to check all these things. And I don't mean this to say, be frightened of launching a brand or a product. These actually are all pretty common sense issues that if you take the time, you'll think about them anyway and you'll do them. It's just that so many people are like, I've got to get this out there. I've got to make money. Yes, you'll make more money if you do these things.
Nice.
And I think what you're
Tracy?
saying, yeah, Richard, I think what you're really saying is do your homework and be as prepared as you can. And Bruce and I have seen brands where, like you said, get comps. They never even went to a retail store to see what the competition was doing, which you referred to that already. They've never taken their comps and put them on the shelf to see what it actually looks like. And they've never shipped the product to somebody to make sure that it would arrive okay.
Yeah, and that's something that we also do as part of our exploratory phase when we're designing. Sorry, I'm just going to plug myself in. I'm running out of juice. When we do our design exploratory phase, we always, anyone can show you a design on a white piece of paper, but the reality is it's never going to show up on a white piece of paper. So we always do kind of like a fake shelf set and put that design into the shelf set. Yeah. And we'll discuss up front what's the retailer that you want us to use to give you a gut check of how this design would hold up against competition. But you can start to see, without even making a mock-up, whether it's going to actually perform or whether it's going to resonate in the way you want it to resonate with the consumer. That's really important. We also think through actually that brand experience piece that I was talking about earlier on as well, that, yes, you've asked us to design your package, but ultimately we're designing a brand experience for you. For all the reasons I pointed out earlier on, it's not just about the retail environment. Your brand is going to show up elsewhere. How will it engage with those consumers? And these are just things that as design experts, we want to give our clients so they can make a better evaluation of the design that's right for them, rather than just that's pretty. It has to be effective.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
One way we helped a small brand once that was making their product locally and selling it locally. And they were curious as to the point, Richard, you're just talking about, is would their current construct hold up? And came up with a pretty clever solution. We took 4 cases of product and just went to the UPS store and they shipped it to 4 of their relatives and asked them to ship it back. And then they opened it up and they saw for themselves whether it could take the pounding of getting shipped versus or not. So that was pretty interesting. Tracy?
Yeah. So, Richard, you've had a great career. Love your experience and your background and everything you've shared. But as you look over your career, tell us maybe one thing that you wish you knew now that you would, what advice would you give your younger self as you've had your career here?
That's a really interesting one. I think, when I was at design school, and this might be coming from the UK as well, and the kind of European aesthetic is much more idea based. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is a brand might have a clever, witty hook to it that actually is the engagement factor with the consumer. But I think there was a certain amount of coolness, right? It's just cool. And I think that the first 2, first year, second year, it's all about like, oh, I've got to create a cool design so I can win a design award. But the end of the day is that we're designing to create effective design that engages with consumers, that sells product. If it wins a design award because it's effective product, then that's a win-win. But I think my younger self was really more concerned about getting a D&AD pencil or a Penta award, and it's a bit of a design pissing contest, to be honest. It's not really the be all and end all of why we do what we do. What we do for our clients is create brands that are going to engage with the consumer. They're going to repeat purchase, and it's going to be effective.
So Richard, a bit of a follow-up there with a twist. Of all the projects you've worked on in your career, what's maybe one that came in the door and the client explained what they were trying and you guys were, as when the client left, and because you have a great British accent, you could probably say this and it wasn't offensive. You thought, what the hell? And then it really worked out. What's kind of like something that when you first started, you followed your process. Okay, this sounds crazy, but now let's attack it. If you're comfortable, I think that would be a great story.
I mean, there's been dozens of those. You know, when they have their great idea, they have their product, they have a name that they think's incredible, and you know, you're kind of all scratching your head and giggling and thinking, what, are they crazy? But I think it's about, because they haven't done the steps that we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, right? So they've just been sitting in the garage or talking to friends and family, and friends and family aren't necessarily honest. So they've got this great idea, but actually it's full of flaws. So our job is to sit with them, coach them through why it's perhaps not, and then even give them some kind of foundations of understanding the category, those consumers, and telling them, kind of guiding them in the right way. We also do naming here as well. So that's something that we can add value by actually coming up with a name that's going to connect and mean something and have purpose with a consumer, rather than, you know, some funky name that they've come up with over a few beers with their mates, that they've fallen in love with, but it's just going to fail. But there've been some incredible projects that I've worked on, some past and some recently, that haven't had any issues. One of the ones that comes to mind, when I was in the UK, I think I'd only been working a couple of years, I got the opportunity to work with Carlsberg Tetley, which is a beer manufacturer. You guys have all heard of Carlsberg beer. And we were based in London, and Carlsberg headquarters is in Copenhagen in Denmark. And we got to, myself and the structural designer got to go to Copenhagen, have a tour of the Carlsberg brewery, went behind the scenes. It was incredible. But I was so invested in the project at that point that it just bubbled up to be one of the best brands I've ever worked on because of the whole experience of that. So I think that was just a great experience from a branding perspective. Then more recently, I don't know if you were referring to this, Bruce, earlier on, but we worked with Ethel's Bakery, and they're a gluten-free dessert bar brand in Detroit, Michigan. It's a family-owned business. There was a local play, but through investment, and the want to actually go national, they built a new facility, but they knew their branding had to have a severe uptick in terms of thinking about scale and innovation, and really much better, harder hitting branding, and really celebrating the whole idea of family owned, made with love and care, but also Michigan based. All their ingredients were sourced from Michigan, so there was a lot of pride there. So that was a fantastic one to have worked on, and they're doing really, really well. They're in every Whole Foods in the country now. So
familiar with that brand.
Target and Costco, and all because they built a bigger facility, they positioned their brand correctly, and they updated their branding. So that's something I'm really proud of. We're really proud of at LBB. And again, we've got a great relationship with our client. It's almost like we've become a part of the family. And I think that they would probably attest to the same thing. And then another one is Halo, which is a pet food brand. It's owned by a company called Better Choice Pet Food. And Halo is actually a brand that existed in the past, and they positioned themselves very much as a holistic pet food. But it was sold. A private equity conglomerate came together, bought it, reformulated the whole product, and repositioned it around the whole idea of happiness, and really kind of engaging with that sort of pet parent. pets today's are almost, children.
Yeah.
They're treated like an extra child in the family. So having that kind of happy connection with the consumer was really, really important. And one of the things I think we did, which was really, really smart, is we did a lot of research to figure out if they could own a color within the category. So
Interesting.
we've worked on brands before, like Stella and Chewy's, for example. This is another pet food brand. They're the red brand. So how could we do what Stella and Chewy's are doing, but with Halo? And we actually saw that no one was using purple. So we identified purple as being the brand color, and then built the portfolio with 3 different pillars, call them almost like a good, better, best perspective in terms of the product. And we've launched that, and it's doing absolute gangbusters. So really excited about that one too. But again, this goes back to everything that I was talking about. It was about figuring out how to strategically position the brand, what its tone of voice was, and how we were going to engage with those different consumers in a way that would let them feel that they're making the right choice for their pet, that they would continue to buy the product.
Well, I'm sure if Halo is healthy and expensive, my wife buys it for our dog. Tracy, anything else before we start heading toward the finish line?
No, I don't think so. But Richard, you've been extremely insightful, lots of good wisdom. And I know that our audience is going to enjoy watching this episode.
So
Thanks
Richard,
for having me. I really enjoyed it.
No, that's great. So Richard, if folks want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. Yeah, anyone wants to get in touch with me, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way. Or if you prefer email, you can absolutely email me at work, which is richard@littlebigBrands.com.
Great. Okay, Tracy, the big finish, baby.
The big finish. Again, thank you so much, Richard. This has been a great episode. For our audience, we do post every other Tuesday. And please follow us on our LinkedIn page, Road to Retail. We also have our YouTube channel. And now recently we have also added Spotify, and we're also on iTunes, all under Road to Retail. So again, thanks for joining us today, Richard. Thanks our audience. And we will look for future episodes.
Good luck out there.
Yes.
Bye, guys. Thank you.